and welcome back to Catholic Drive Time. This is your host, Adrian Fonseca. It's so good to be on with you today. It's always good to be here, even despite the horrible news going on around the world, but especially in our neck of the woods, in our backyard. There's always bad news going on, but at the end of the day, it's good to be here. It's good to be here with you. Now, the story here, and this is really the only story we're going to have time to cover for today because it's a big deal, is the story with Bishop Strickland. Maybe you heard over the weekend, maybe you didn't, but I'm going to be letting you know now. And Tito mentioned it in his news break a second ago. The story here is that Bishop Strickland is receiving an apostolic visitation. And I want to start with explaining what an apostolic visitation is. So an apostolic visitation is when the Pope, and really it's called by the Pope himself, and this is pretty much a action of the Pope or the papal office. And he can obviously delegate those kind of things to other people, but he sends bishops or priests, but in this case bishops, in most cases he sends bishops to investigate different groups or orders or dioceses. And so they will be bringing a bishop and they will investigate what's going on there. And so the National Catholic Register put out a great explanation of this. They said here that according to the Dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith, an apostolic visitation is an exceptional initiative of the Holy See being the papal office, that involves a delegated visitor or visitors being sent to evaluate an ecclesiastical institute, such as a seminary, diocese, or religious order, on behalf of the Pope. Apostolic visitations are intended to assist the institute in question to improve the way in which it carries out its functions in the life of the church. Now, this is very concerning the way this happens because Pope Francis has a lot of history using apostolic visitations. In fact, the National Catholic Register reports here the practice has been employed frequently by Francis during his 10-year pontificate. Bishop Daniel Fernandez Torres, the Diocese of Archiedo in Puerto Rico, was reportedly the subject of an apostolic visitation made by Chicago's Cardinal Blaise Cupich before his removal from office on March 9th, 2022. Now, there is the reason why was never given officially. However, it was reported that it was due to insubordination to the Pope, likely related to Bishop Fernandez's breaking from his fellow Puerto Rican bishops by not sending his diocesan seminaries to a newly established national seminary, and also refusing to sign a joint statement on the duty to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, several other bishops have been removed from their diocese or given early retirements after receiving apostolic visitations. This happened to Bishop Martin Hawley, who was in October 24, 2018, the Diocese of Memphis, Tennessee, after a 3-day apostolic visitation. In June 2018, Archbishop Gregory Wilton, and then the Archbishop of Atlanta, then another, Bernard Hebda of St. Paul in Minneapolis. All of these people were looking into allegations of mismanagement of diocesan personal and finances. So all these different situations, there are tons and tons I could give you and list you tons of examples where Pope Francis sends an apostolic visitation and then the bishop is gone, gets jettisoned, gets bye-byed. This is very concerning. So now we see, okay, this is the context in which we see Bishop Strickland giving an apostolic visitation. So a number of outlets are reporting this. I kind of gathered information from all of them. So to give credit to at least a few that I can remember off the top of my head, of the Pillar Catholic, CatholicVote, National Catholic Register, LifeSite News, Church Militant, a number of articles, a number of outlets have been reporting on it, and I kind of read all of them in order to try to get a full picture of what's going on. Also, Where Peter Is another one I read here for this. Here it says, witnesses confirm to CatholicVote that the apostolic visitation is being led by Bishop Dennis Sullivan of Camden, New Jersey, and Gerald Frederick Kicanas, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, retired bishop of Tucson, Arizona, and former auxiliary bishop of Chicago, Illinois. Both bishops, accompanied by 2 priest experts in canon law from out of town, interviewed the witnesses about what they know regarding the personal life and pastoral activities of Bishop Strickland. Now, if you don't know who these bishops are, I wouldn't blame you because I didn't either, so I had to look them up. I was looking at Bishop Sullivan first, and he was the Vicar General for Cardinal Dolan of New York. And I thought that was very interesting because Cardinal Dolan of New York has a little bit of a negative press. I believe he was the one who was reportedly accidentally sent a tweet saying "Nighty Night, baby," and people were like, "Oh, who was that supposed to be for?" He said, "Oh, that was for my little sister," and everybody was like, "You call your little sister baby? It's kind of strange." And Bishop Sullivan was the Vicar General for Cardinal Dolan. That doesn't mean anything explicitly. There was also a lot of sexual abuse in his diocese, which he put out very good statements saying he condemns this and all things like that. So I don't know if there's anything, a cursory look at him. These are the two things that came up. And now this other bishop, Bishop Gerald Frederick retired of Tucson, Arizona, and former auxiliary of Chicago. Now, he has a much more interesting story here. When I was looking him up, it says there is a article I found out from KOLD, which is, I believe, a local news outlet from where he was from. And it says here that it was said that they wanted to show how the archdiocese concealed abuse for decades, including moving priests to new parishes where they molested again. The records date back to the 1980s, 1990s, a time when Kicanas was a leader in a Chicago seminary that was home to some of the accused priests. Now, Tuscan News Now attempted to talk to Bishop at the diocese office, but we were told that unless we kept the case of convicted priest Daniel McCormick out of our story, the bishop would not grant our request for an interview. Lawyers say that the bishop was one of the many Catholic Church leaders involved in a massive cover-up related to the priest sex abuse cases. In the Father McCormack case, court documents state Bishop Kicanas was aware of the allegations against McCormack, but still supported his ordination to become a priest. So, is this accurate portrayal of the bishop? I don't know. This is what came up when I looked them up to try to see just who these bishops were. I didn't search for anything. I just simply typed in their name into Google, and these are the first articles that came up whenever I looked them up. So, very interesting that those were the bishops who were chosen to investigate Bishop Strickland. Now, the interviews with Bishop Strickland took place under confidentiality at a Holiday Inn in downtown Tyler. And according to the witnesses, they were required to sign a non-disclosure agreement, something very unusual in a canonical process. The apostolic visitation was requested by the new prefect of the Dicastery of Bishops, Archbishop Robert Francis Prevost. Now, Prevost is a Chicago native and a member of the Order of St. Augustine, served as a missionary in Peru, and he was appointed by Pope Francis to be the Bishop of Chiclayo, northern Peru. In November 21st, 2020, he was named by Pope Francis as a member of the Congregation for the Bishops upon the recommendation of who? Cardinal Blaise Cupich of Chicago. Very interesting. Things keep going back to Cupich. Now, January 30th, 2023, Francis appointed him as prefect for the Dicastery for Bishops, effective April 12th. Now, the Prevost is slated to become the next U.S. cardinal in the upcoming consistory. Very interesting how these things happen. Now, many people are saying that the reason for this apostolic visitation is not because of his good things, but because of this tweet. He said, Patrick Coffin has challenged the authenticity of Pope Francis. If this is accurate, I disagree. I believe Pope Francis is the Pope. So people who are accusing Bishop Strickland of being a sedevacantist, he has very clearly stated, very recently stated, that he believes Pope Francis is the Pope. He says, but it is time for me to say that I reject his program of undermining the deposit of faith. Follow Jesus. Now, this is very interesting because people will say, oh, how could he say such a thing? And yet this synod on synodality that we're seeing, where we saw this, we're going to talk about this at 30 past the hour. It seems like Bishop Strickland is right. So people are accusing him of being crazy and being bad. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Because I think Bishop Strickland is simply telling the truth. Now, it goes on and says, the question focused on Strickland's administrative leadership in the diocese rather than on his outside social media personality. The priest told them it was not even primarily out of his rants about Pope Francis, saying that it focused mainly on governance issues. Now, that's interesting because in his diocese, there are 21 men in priestly formation for the territory of only 55,000 Catholics, a rate of seminarians per Catholics considerably higher than most other U.S. dioceses.
Like Chicago.
The diocese is also reportedly in good financial shape. exemplified in part by its ability to raise 99% of its $2.3 million goal for the 2021 Bishop's Appeal 6 months ahead of schedule. Now, this is very, very interesting situation that we see being laid out here. Now, the question of his governance, people are saying that they are acknowledging the bishop's penchant for controversy. One source close to Strickland told the Pillar that the bishop is confident about the visitation. The bishop doesn't want to make too big of a deal out of it, the source said. He's got vocations. The diocese is doing well financially, so by all the numbers, he's doing very well. He's trying not to make a big deal of it. But a priest who was questioned during the visitation said that the interviewers were already asking questions about who might be a good fit to replace Strickland. Very interesting. Very interesting that they're asking them these questions. Now, there's a number of things that could be said about the good archbishop. Or the good bishop, not archbishop. The good bishop, he is in fact the only bishop who is an ordinary. He is the only bishop who is an ordinary to be publicly attacking the errors around the world. He is the only local ordinary who is willing to go out and condemn Father James Martin, his pro-homosexuality blasphemy. He is one of the only ones who is a local ordinary who is willing to go out and denounce the evils of President Biden. He is one of the only local ordinaries who is willing to urge people to deny Holy Communion to the former U.S. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. He is one of the only bishops who came out against satanic groups, against the LA Dodgers, against all these very, very bad things around our country. In fact, this is why so many people refer to Bishop Strickland as America's bishop. Because, yes, there were other good bishops out there, but none of them are local ordinaries. They don't have a diocese. They don't have anything where they are actually in charge. They get sidelined to a ministry. They get sidelined to an office in the Vatican, so that way they are not able to actually have any authority. Now, much more could be said. For instance, there are stories about him and the good things that he said regarding, like, for instance, the coronavirus, when he came out and spoke against the vaccines, which now we're finding out more and more things about that. Now, he came out against a lot of the things at the Vatican. He came out a lot of the things against the Synod on Synodality, against women priesthood, against homosexual heresy, all these different things. He's doing the only bishops. So let's say that there's financial mismanagement. Let's just say that he's not very good at governing the local place. I don't think that's true, but let's just say that's true for the sake of argument. How many bishops are bad at governing their diocese? How many dioceses are closing down churches? How many dioceses have no vocations? Are these bishops getting sidelined? That's very interesting that that's the excuse they would give of governance. And yet he's the only one who is willing to teach the faith, who loves the faith, who loves the faithful, and who the faithful love him. So let's say a prayer for Bishop Strickland today. We'll pray for him and keep him in our daily rosaries. I hope you do the same. We'll be right back talking about the Synod on Synodality right after this.